Hi, very good evening. Hello and warm welcome. I'm sure you all guys and your loved one are staying safe and keeping fit. I'm your host, Ajit Sahu, co-founder of Indusion Consulting, a premier search firm specializing in senior and mid-management talent across industries. Today, my co-host is my colleague, Archana Rao. Archana leads our real estate, infrastructure, and industrial practice. We are very delighted to have on this Friday evening an esteemed panel, industry stalwarts from real estate space across faculties, renowned developers, super fund managers, and the best from IPC. Let us all welcome Mr. Rohit Gera, Mr. Mike Holland, Vipul Rumta, Mr. Balaji Rao, Mr. Ramesh Nair, and Mr. Kuldeep Chawla, and our wonderful viewers from locations all over. Today is all about getting real with reality and to derive a vision on way forward. The topic for today is Exponential Leadership Real Estate Playbook in Pursuit of Panacea. Real estate is the growth engine of our economy. It creates a multiplier effect. In fact, it is the second largest or second biggest employer in our country. The spread of COVID-19 has caused economic and financial impacts, and it is a very big humanitarian crisis, resulting in massive disruption and significant uncertainty. The real estate industry is quite in the middle of the storm. And this pandemic impact is perhaps the fourth black swan event being witnessed by the sector since 2016. Though the series of original lockdowns are getting over, it seems like we're still in a lockdown limbo, that uncertain state where we know things are a bit getting safer and the country is slowly grinding back to the normalcy. Now, how the sector is gearing up, getting back into action, let our superpowered panel share their insights on action adopted across stakeholders while navigating this new normal and discuss what can be done to revive and stimulate the sector. We firmly believe that disruptions present challenges while creating opportunities for businesses who are willing to adapt and grow. With this, I invite Archana to introduce our panel. Archana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ajit, and a very warm welcome to all our panelists and viewers. Hope everyone's doing well and safe. Delighted to co-host this and introduce our panelists with such stellar backgrounds. Our first panelist for the evening, Mr. Rohit Gera. Rohit is a third-generation real estate entrepreneur and managing director at Gera Developments. Rohit is best known for his innovative thinking, reflected in differentiated product lines and customer engagement initiatives. His philosophy shapes the company's culture, which constantly endeavors to outdo while remaining true to the core values of trust, quality, innovation, and customer first. He is an industry leader and is reputed for his unflinching honesty on legislation, micro and macro issues that face the real estate sector. He has impeccable academic credentials, a double major in building construction, project management, and economics from the University of Massachusetts, and an advanced management degree in real estate from the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. Our second panelist, Mr. Vipul Rumta. Vipul is the Managing Director and CEO of HDFC Capital Advisors Limited, one of the largest real estate private equity funds in India. He has over 2 decades of experience in the real estate sector across mortgages, fundraising, and investments, and has managed funds in excess of US $4 billion. His current focus is on creating a robust financial ecosystem, including technological intervention and supply-side ecosystem financing for affordable housing in India. Vipul has consistently been rated as one of the top professionals in real estate investment industry and has been the recipient of multiple awards, including Fund Manager of the Decade by CNBC. He is also an avid traveler and runs a food club in Delhi. Our third panelist, Mr. Balaji Rao. Balaji is currently the managing partner, real estate for Axis AMC. He has an extensive career record of over 3 decades in both real estate and financial services, serving in marquee organizations such as K. Raheja, Standard Chartered, ANZ, TCG, and Starwood. Over the years, he has developed millions of square feet pan India across residential, commercial, industrial, retail, and hospitality asset classes. He has been instrumental in building successful businesses from the ground up and has been primarily responsible for bringing in investments of several billion dollars into the sector. Balaji is a rank holding chartered accountant and holds an MBA from IIM Calcutta. He is an avid reader, enjoys traveling, and is also into philosophy. Our fourth panelist, Mr. Ramesh Nair. Ramesh is the CEO and country head of JLL India and has over 2 decades of diversified and hands-on professional expertise in most facets of the real estate business. He has worked across diverse asset classes, advising leading domestic and multinational owners, investors, and occupiers. Ramesh chairs the India Leadership Council of JLL India and is also a member of the Asia Pacific Board and the J8, a group of JLL's 8 largest countries in terms of profit and revenues globally. As one of the pioneers of professional real estate services in India, he has been instrumental in introducing many new concepts into the sector. He is the chairman of CII Real Estate and Infrastructure Conclave. He has also been a guest lecturer at prestigious educational institutes and has written numerous thought leadership articles for some of India's leading publications. Our fifth panelist, Mr. Michael Holland. Mike is the Chief Executive Officer of Embassy Office Parks, India's first and only listed REIT, sponsored by Embassy Group and Blackstone. Embassy REIT listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange in April 2019. At April 2020, the business had a market capitalization in excess of $3 billion. Embassy REIT is Asia's largest office REIT by area, comprising over 33 million square feet of business parks and city center offices across Bangalore, Mumbai, Noida, and Pune. Home to over 160 international corporate occupiers and over 200,000 people, tenants in the portfolio include global companies across sectors. Mike has worked in Asia since 1995 and has lived in India for close to 2 decades. He is also a board member of a number of charitable organizations with a focus on disability and education. Our sixth panelist and moderator, Mr. Kuldeep Chawla. Kuldeep is currently the Group CFO for Puravankara Group, a diversified real estate group with active projects across the gateway cities of South and West India. His career of over 3 decades spans complete program management of capital at both operating as well as platform levels, with life cycle investments and divestments in private equity, infrastructure, growth capital, and specifically real estate. Kuldeep was earlier a partner at Red Fort Capital, India's leading real estate private equity fund, with about $1 billion in investments pan-India. He has been a recipient of the Udyog Ratna Award. Kuldeep has an MBA from FMS Delhi. Kuldeep spends considerable time mentoring young entrepreneurs as well. With this, we look forward to an insightful and an engaging discussion ahead. The last part of the session would be a Q&A session, questions posted by the viewers to our panel, could be specific questions directed to panelists as well. Indusion will moderate the same. Thank you, and over to you, Kuldeep.
Thank you, Archana, Ajit, and Indusion for putting this together. Welcome, co-panelists, and thank you to the audience for making time to attend this on a Friday evening. Our goal today is to make this session interesting with a different take on the sector's issues. Between the sound perspective of all our co-panelists, all of whom are well-regarded experts, our attempt would be to explore how we can navigate the unknown of tomorrow and not just capitalize on the opportunities that may emerge, but indeed how we can actually create those opportunities. So we'll talk, a little bit about how we think as an industry, we ought to create demand. I'm sure all of you have been to enough webinars in the recent past, so we won't talk about, real estate, the multiplier effect, so on and so forth, but how we can stimulate demand, how we can get the sector back to normalcy. How will life change for all of us? What does that mean in terms of how we live, how we play, how we work? What can we do about that? How can we make that shift? What are the skills that the real estate sector needs to adapt to the new VUCA world? What role will capital play in this journey? What do various stakeholders need to do? How can we win back customer loyalty, customer trust? We ask what the sector can do for itself, for example. So our format today would be to request each panelist to give their perspective for a minute or two, after which we shall engage in an interactive session covering as many of the issues as is practically feasible in the given time. We request all of you in the audience to send your questions in via email, which the Indusion team will try and put together. And we request that you be specific and brief, and if possible, address it to one of the co-panelists. Allow me to start with you, Mike, given your experience and extensive experience and perspective of the office markets. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, hi. Evening, everyone. And as Kuldeep said, thank you very much for sparing your Friday evening. It's a great feeling to get to the weekend. I left my office a couple of hours ago and had a Friday evening feeling. But not for this webinar, probably be on my first excuse now. So I've got to look forward to. I won't be talking about business that I'm responsible for because I've introduced in some detail. I really just put a few points out for Q&A. 3 weeks ago, after our earnings were announced, we had announced full year results and our fourth quarter distribution for the year up to 1,882 crores, or about $250 million. And I've spent the last 2.5 weeks since then on calls with investors from both India and all around the world. And I have to say that that past track record takes up probably more than 10% of the conversations, because people are interested in today and tomorrow. So what does the future hold? How do things change? Clearly, there's been a significant amount of discussion around the whole work from home program and project, and maybe we'll talk on that. So, I have had dozens of conversations with all to get at my view on what we're going about. I think we're fairly confident about our conclusions on that. The other area is what is the direct impact on work? How does that change the way in which we're working, and therefore overall urban environment where we can continue operating in the way we're working. And clearly, while there has been a lot of negativity in the media, and really it is a very serious challenge that globally we're facing, and in India. One of the things that I like to highlight is that we still have in India the global tech sector that employs 4.5 million people directly, and therefore another 10 million plus people indirectly. And that is the one sector that one can do and say, this is a beacon of light in a fairly economic grey cloud. And I would just underscore that India is that global talent center, and that's why we have an office industry in India. It's driven by the fact that the talent is there. And as the world becomes more geographically you're physically disconnected, clearly, and tonight is an example of it, clearly it is becoming more connected through technology. And so India and urban India and the youth of India in the technology space, what I call the NASCOM type of industries, the 1,200 to 1,300 global captive centers that operate here in India, in addition to those top tier Indian corporations, we believe, you know, that has a great present and it has a great future, and that in turn will drive jobs, will drive demand, not just demand for offices, but demand for residential and demand for FMCG and general goods, goods in general. So, you know, we understand the difficulties that people are faced with today, but certainly we have a lot of positivity about where we're going once we get past this, we hope, short phase.
Excellent, Mike. Thank you for that. Ramesh, let me come to you, Rohit, as a well-respected residential developer. From where you sit, what are you hearing? What are your customers telling you? You know, your perspective.
Sure. So I think what we're hearing from our customers, and you know, we've actually been able to get customers to buy even during these last 60 odd days. And so the single biggest concern that we find with customers is that there is a lack of certainty as far as their careers, jobs, and salaries are concerned. And I think that that's really, you talk to anybody, the general thought is maybe there'll be 5%, 10% reduction in terms of manpower. The question and the challenge is, am I one of those 5 or 10%? Right? And I think that's what, that uncertainty is what's causing people to hold back on their purchase decisions. So that's one of the things that we're hearing clearly from customers. The other thing that we're finding is that consumers are now increasingly heading to developers where there is a track record of delivery, where there is currently concrete being poured on the site. And you know, when they come to people like us and we're talking to them, they're not so fussed about this big price reduction talk that's going on. They're more concerned about, they're willing to pay as long as they're assured delivery. So I think that's there's a shift that's taken place there. They're completely willing to pay for the assurance of delivery. That's the other thing that we're seeing. Just on another kind of higher note, I think as far as, and since we're discussing this at a sector level, right? I think one of the things that we heard the Prime Minister talk about is Atmanirbharta. I think as a sector, we need to learn to be self-reliant, not expect the government to do anything for us. Their position has been clear for the last 6 years, not going to come up with any sector-specific SOPs. And they've budget after budget gone away from doing that. And therefore, for us to expect demand boosters and things like that, is, you know, we need to help ourselves. We need to figure things out. I think we do see opportunities as far as, you know, we're interest rates virtually at all lows. There's something as far as a sector that we can do and talk about and push and promote. I think there's also another opportunity, and I hope we get some time to talk about it, is that there is another potential problem coming up as far as the sector is concerned a few years down the line as a result of tight cash flows for many developers. And we can, as a sector, get ahead of that and prevent that problem being solved with a whole new level of legislation, either from the RBI or from, you know, a slap onto RERA, which again comes as a ball and chain for the sector and the industry. So there's an opportunity for us for image repair, for pushing sales. There's lower interest rates. So, you know, it's good times in many ways. There's lots of opportunities in many ways. But without, you know, my prediction for the next 6 to 12 months is that the sector is going to continue to stagger, to stumble, and we're going to have to find our own way.
Great. So I think 3 things. Number 1, we will talk about demand. We want your inputs on that. Number 2, you talked about price that's been topical of late. Again, we'll talk about it and the other things that you mentioned. Let me move to Ramesh. Ramesh, you know, as an international firm, what are you hearing from your international and from your India offices? You know, quick perspective.
I think, Kuldeep, the most important thing is all of us accepting the magnitude of what's happening. I can still feel there are sectors or players in the real estate space who have not yet accepted the magnitude of these challenges. We've seen that investor behavior, which is anxiety, denial, fear. Although the fear is inside, but a lot of players are still in the denial mode. I think some things which we need to accept is nobody is able to price risk. And because nobody is able to price risk, nobody is able to value anything. If you're a home buyer, if you're offered something at 1 crore, you're thinking I'm going to get it at 90 lakhs. If you're an office occupier, if you're offered something at 70 rupees, you think you're going to get it at 60 rupees. If you're a fund looking at buying something, if you're offered something at 8, you think you're going to get 8.5% yield. So I think that's the big challenge right now, which is nobody is able to value and price risk at this time across the sectors, across all the regions. This is one of the biggest challenges I see. Short term, we need to accept the fact that demand is going to go down. Now, short term, we don't know if short term is 6 months or 1 year. We don't know. We all been making predictions, but we just don't know. I remember talking to Vipul early on, and he said, Ramesh, stop focusing on real estate, focus on the medical aspect. And since then, every day morning, I catch up on some reading on the medical aspect of thing which I was not doing. We also need to realize and accept the fact that launches across all asset classes, whether it's office, retail, residential, speculative development is going to drastically come down. Nobody, even the biggest players today, don't have the appetite, risk-taking appetite to launch anything. And the third and most important is decision making is just slowed down massively. Whatever it is, this is a retailer wanting to get into a mall, if it's a home buyer, his decision making, an office occupier, his decision making. So these are some of the generic trends across the space which we are seeing, Kuldeep.
Thank you. Vipul, you're a natural choice. Next, Ramesh led me on to you by saying, we don't know what risk capital is doing. How are you looking at this?
I'll give you a very simple answer because you said 1 minute. So let me start by saying that I'll be lying if I say that I know too much more than what 618 attendees know or my fellow panelists know. I think if I say that I know more, that is more because of that introduction that you gave, which is kind of hiding. So I'm trying to hide behind that. But as we say in our industry, past is not an indicator of future performance. That's what we say as fund management. That's our first disclaimer we do. And I think, fundamental, it's very interesting because one of the things you mentioned in Balaji is this thing is philosophy. But fundamental, I think, nature, or if you go behind the question that you're asking, is that we are in control of what is going to happen, or we know what is going to happen, and that is why we can predict what is going to happen, and so on and so forth. And I think one thing that personally I have learned over the last 3 months, if I can sum it in one word, it is probably humility, because the fact is that there is not much that is in our control, and we just need to take it day by day and go ahead. So you talked about capital. Everybody knows capital is opportunistic in nature. Capital will go where it seemingly can multiply itself in whichever way, IRR multiple, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, in a fear scenario, it is scarce. But I think there are some phenomenal green shoots. Fundamentally, again, I always feel that there is a certain romance attached to distress word. And everybody loves to see the stuff being distressed around you. And, that is why there is a natural tendency to overstate if something is in distress. I was watching some business news in the morning, today for a couple of hours, and it only talked about what kind of distress is there on real estate, and there have been recent comments and all kind of stuff. And irrespective of whichever way you look at it, if it obviously it is going not the right way, it is negative. But to state the, like Mike also talked about, to state that it is just gone to the dumps and is crushed and blah 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 is clearly an overstatement. I can give umpty number of facts from maybe later in the course of the conversation from our portfolio, but limited point, there is just too much pessimism. There is no reason for that pessimism. A, B, I think the focus should be on the right things, which is probably not exactly what is happening in real estate, but what is happening to your employees, what is happening to family, what is happening to self. I think that becomes priority number one. And if that is okay, the business will get okay.
Interesting thoughts. We'll come back to you, Vipul, on that. Balaji, as a custodian of a different pool of capital, are you seeing your domestic investors behave differently from overseas ones?
Definitely, Vipul, because domestic investors are of a different psychographic profile as compared to overseas investors, because overseas investors generally are more institutional also, whereas domestic investors tend to be high net worth individuals and family offices sometimes. But basically, what we see in the environment around us is the risk off behavior. This is, as Vipul and the other panelists have said, is because of the pessimism we see. I think real estate is a staple product and a service, and it's not going anywhere. It will be there. What people are confusing, however, in this crisis, which has come in a long list of other sort of speed breakers we have had for this industry, is the fact that we need a course correction. And if you look, the industry has been pretty stagnant and pretty much sliding down in a way over the last 6-7 years. And there have been quite a few factors, whether you talk about the implementation of RERA or the GST or the DMON or the NBFC crisis, and now finally this COVID-19. We have all seen a lot of sort of speed breakers and warning signals, which tell us that real estate needs a course correction. It needs a version 2.0, where you need to figure out how to do this business more professionally and more corporatized way. And if one can do that, because we fly in real estate, as I said, is a twin engine plane. One is sales and the other is debt. There's very little equity in most of the projects which we see. So you need to stabilize it with equity. So we have to bring in equity, or somebody needs to take haircuts. But I think a lot of course correction is necessary. And this risk of behavior is going to put a very high premium on the real estate risk as we speak. So that's why there's been no real transmission of rates, or even when we see the interest rates by RBI going down. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it is worthwhile to do this work because the future is bright, that's for sure. It is the darkest before dawn, they say. So I'm quite absolutely optimistic. I'm absolutely 100%. I'm sure we will turn this around. Maybe it will take me a year and a half, but we will turn it around. But it will need a different set of parameters. It will need a different set of inputs for this whole industry to come out of it. And we will be in the vanguard of the economic growth which this country will see. That's also I'm pretty sure of.
It's very encouraging to see when capital providers actually talk with the optimism that I hear, Balaji, from both you and Vipul. And from that, I'm going to take up something, Balaji, that you said, version 2.0. Mike, what is your industry doing for that 2.0? What are the partnerships that you think we need to revive demand? Is there a fundamental shift, or is this just a storm in a teacup? Where is the trade-off between the landlords and the occupiers?
So I liked, in fact, I wrote down Balaji's phrase, that course correction. I like that a lot. I actually feel that we're not in a binary position where we need to or are about to make a radical shift. I think that over the last decade, there has certainly been an evolution in a number of the sectors within real estate within India. And there is certainly, that is going to continue. That course correction, so to speak, I believe is very clear in the office sector, that there are now probably not more than a dozen hardcore institutional office players in the market, each one of which has some level of relationship and, as was mentioned, equity type support in their businesses. And to prosper in the office space, I think that is what is going to be required as we go forward. And the positive of that is that those players with strong balance sheets are able to address the road bumps that come everywhere in the world and in all businesses now and again. We have challenges, but those businesses are prepared in terms of their capital structure for those road bumps. I do also think that there is a need, which I'm happy to see, for a course correction around this issue of density of the workplace, that for at least probably a decade now, we've seen, maybe actually more than a decade, we have seen what I've now started referring to as certain occupiers treating the people who work in offices as factors of production, just like in a Henry Ford car factory, and looking at hyper efficiency around all things, including the physical space in which they occupy. And I think that that trend has, by the best companies and the best occupiers, actually, for a number of years, they've been looking at that in a different way. I think now all occupiers will look at qualitative aspects of the real estate that they have as their office space, and not just the quantitative aspect, one of which is manifested through density. So I think that that's a trend in office space that's a positive course correction that we're about to see. I also think it's a positive course correction that people will have more flexibility about how they work and where they work. That is something that, frankly, is not that new in many parts of the world. I think we'd all be aware of that, particularly in the tech industry and customer-facing industries in Western Europe and North America, that's been there for many years. I think it's a good thing that we'll see a course correction on that workplace flexibility here in India. And of course, the other issue is that as India becomes, in the tech space, becomes more and more sophisticated, which it has over a number of years, and that trend will continue because of the talent. I think that many of the companies that are operating and creating globally relevant, sophisticated technology services are being recognized, and that will be a midterm positive influence. In fact, I'll finish that with it's just come to mind, a reference. I spoke to a very senior level individual, Indian guy, but connected with a business based out of Zurich. He was promoted a couple of years ago. He's a good friend of mine, promoted, but chose to stay living in India and do his job from India instead of in Zurich. And he was saying to me about his staff in Bangalore that they are now being recognized by their global colleagues because they're getting on these Zoom calls and they're working in a very collaborative digital way. He said, my team here in India are now beginning to get the kudos and the respect internally to the company that they deserve from their senior colleagues in Europe and in North America. So, you know, those types of course corrections, I don't think necessarily are binary quick changes, but this is all part of the way in which, at least in the technology office space, India continues on a positive trajectory. So for us to specifically answer your question, you know, in our business, we will continue to partner with our tenants and the best global, and that includes the best Indian technology companies and international companies. So that's how, you know, we'll continue talking to them, listening to them, and aiming to provide them with what they want for their people. And as Rohit said, actually, one thing that people are not going to scrimp and save and pay and worry about a few rupees here and there is the quality of the environment that their employees are in, the health and safety and cleanliness and governance of what people are in. So with that course correction, again, a qualitative positive move is another good thing about where we're at here in India.
Great. Rohit, do you see a technological shift beyond just digitization and, you know, marketing and the use of precast in technology in Resi? Do you see, what do you see, you know, when you talk to your customers, your stakeholders, your employees, your vendors, you know?
So I think prop tech, as it's generally now referred, right, has been, as an industry, we've been very slow to kind of absorb and to adopt information technology and systems. And you know, the only thing digital is about your marketing and, you know, lead generation has been for a large number of developers. But I think that's changing. I think that's changing extremely rapidly. I can give you just like a small example of what we recently did. So we have a customer-facing app which is called Gera World, and so our customers can, you know, get documents, their statement of account, and all of that on the system. Now, if you buy an apartment, most real estate developers today, and you send money, you make a payment, it takes 7 to 10 days to get your receipt. If you order something on a Swiggy or Zomato, you get an instant text message saying 200 rupees has gone out from your account, and, you know, it's debited to your account. So real estate developers are still following the old traditional way. We tied up with the bank. We've created through their systems the virtual account system. It links into our SAP system. That links into the customer's app. Now you make a wire transfer and you get you get the same time information that it would take for you to, you would get your Swiggy update. Now that's just in one area of dealing with the customer. Managing the entire warranty, 5-year defect liability period, that happens through the system. Construction quality monitoring, another area where we've put in a lot of effort and you know, found success in that. So I think a lot of technology improvements that a lot of developers are doing. There are a lot of players in this. I think the challenge is really adopting that and people investing into that. Right now, I think everybody is so concerned about conserving cash. The larger conversation that happens in private as far as developers are concerned is, are you paying your salaries? If so, how much of your salary are you paying? Are you holding back? Oh, we are saying up to 30,000 bucks, we're giving everything. After that, we're doing, you know, staggered deferment. Those are the kind of conversations. I think we're a little bit ways away from people actually having the capital to then go out and deploy into technology. But the paradox of that is, if you actually deploy that technology, you can build far more efficiency. But you know, you have to have the surplus cash, and developers have to have that mindset and the surplus cash flow to go out and invest in the numerous technologies which are available out there. We use drones, for example, to do drone shoots over the site. We actually check the volume of excavation sitting at the desk. This is nothing that is created by any developer. There are phenomenal technology providers out there. It's just, you know, developers will start adopting this as and when they find the bandwidth, cash flow, and those kind of things to sort out before they can actually go in there.
Is the discussion that is currently on with developers also around the more topical subject of cutting prices? You alluded to that in your opening remarks, and I did want to take you up on that, Rohit.
The topic of cutting prices has been, I think it's the last 48 hours since the Honorable Minister brought that issue up. And so the topic then has shifted into, well, if we're willing to cut prices, which, some people may be willing to do so, we have to pay, he said, drop prices by 20%. Okay. Your circle rates, if you're more than 10% below circle rate, the developer pays income tax on the difference between the circle, that 10%, 90% of the circle rate and the selling price. The flat buyer pays income tax on that. The flat buyer pays stamp duty on the full circle rate price. And on this fabulous cake is the fact that if you buy something below the circle rate, every single customer is really careful of the income tax officer coming knocking on his door, saying that you must have paid black money. That's why you bought it at a lower price. So this is a systemic issue, right? And I can state this on behalf of every developer. Most developers are not interested in holding onto price and have debt and have interest burdens mounting and being at risk of default and not paying their staff and not paying their vendors. There's just no customers for them. And the customers are also fearful about this, anything less than 10%. So it's a systemic issue on pricing that needs to be addressed. It's not purely the developer. Listen, if one developer wants to speculate in his own inventory, it's his money, it's his choice. It's a free market. That's what capitalism is about. You can't force somebody to sell at a lower price. But if you want a developer to lower price, then the government has no right to be expecting their pound of flesh at their set prices. And I'll say the last thing I'll say on this is everybody knows that demonetization decimated the real estate sector. It was November 2016. April 2017, the government of Maharashtra raised ready-reckoner rates across the state. Okay, what are we talking about? So the topic of prices is now kind of come into the forefront. I don't think developers are emotionally attached to price. For the most part, they're too concerned about cash flow, getting things going. Every developer, I'm saying every developer has understood that if he has concrete being poured on the site, a customer is going to buy. If he doesn't have concrete being poured on the site, nobody's buying a home. He's just not able to do it. So
what do you think, the development community needs to do to earn back the trust and loyalty, of the customer?
How many days do you have for this session?
Okay, quick 2-minute answer.
Okay. So as a sector, I think we are contributors to the problem. But I can also state that we're not the only contributors to the problem, right?
Fair point.
We see up to 2017, up to last year, there was this party that was going on with a group of financial institutions, funding cash outs, funding, let's call it a party of cowboys. Okay,
right.
Funding guys who are cowboys, funding developers who are cowboys, right? Suddenly the party stops. Okay, the ILFS problem comes up. They stop funding. Developers are stuck. Okay, so it's a problem that's created by not just the developer alone, but by the entire ecosystem. We brought RERA in, and we suddenly changed the rules of the game, which was great, which was necessary. But we were functioning in a paradigm in the past. Let me tell you this: Vipul's on this call, okay, and every financial institution. The RBI has said that banks cannot fund real estate developers for land acquisition. True. Every bank was funding real estate developers for land acquisition, looking the other way. 5 years ago, the banks were complicit in finding a solution to archaic legal norms which have been set up with objectives. Mind you, the intent was absolutely right to protect the consumer, to protect the banks and so on. So we have a systemic problem which is created by the entire sector. But the developer's name is on the building, so the first guy you can catch is the developer. And sure, we've had our part in it, but I think we've come together as an entire sector and change things around. And I'll tell you one last thing, which I see as a problem coming up, is RERA solved one problem, and that was developers taking money from sales and diverting it elsewhere. So RERA came in and said, look, 70%, you can take 30%, keep the money for the project. RERA doesn't take into account the fact that what happens if sales don't happen? So my question is, why can't the financial institutions who are lending money to my customer turn around and say, if you go to a real estate developer who has financial closure on the entire project cost, financial closure in place on the entire project cost, there's a lower risk for that customer. We will give that customer, let's say, 25 basis points reduction in his mortgage rate. If we do this without the RBI stepping in or without the RERA thing stepping in, I will guarantee tomorrow morning you'll have 200 developers applying with financial closure, and you'll see a change in the sector. We need to come together and drive this change before it becomes a problem, and suddenly developers are looked at as the bad guys all over again and saying, see, you didn't have the sales, you didn't have financial closure. We need to do this together as a sector.
That's an excellent point. Vipul, let me ask you this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you were a lender, how would you kind of respond to what Rohit just said? If he has financial closure, give his customers a materially lower rate, give him a lower cost of capital. Is that something that's within the realm of possibility?
We need to unmute.
Can't hear you. Yeah, you're on mute, Vipul.
I generally become speechless when Rohit talks, so that's why kind of auto-muted itself. But okay, so first of all, thanks to Rohit. I am assuming he's not referring to us because we kind of have invested something like $500 million since the ILFS fiasco. So that's one.
Absolutely
for the record. Second is about the land funding, because he talked about 5-6 things. So I'm trying to just
fair enough. Go ahead. The mic is yours.
Land fund clearly not allowed. Whether it's NHB for HFCs or RBI for banks, not happening only through other instruments, only to the top 10, maybe 15 developers. I don't know if Rohit is one of them, but maybe he is because he's talking about it. So that's the reason.
Let that pass.
Third, to your question specifically about cost of funds, so I'll not get into it too much, but cost of funds, I would only like to say that it's cost of funds is a function of two factors. Forget our organization. I can speak only for a fund that I run, and not the larger organization. But it's a function of what cost I'm raising the money at, and second, it's a function of the risk. Unfortunately, as a borrower, I would generally, and it's very natural to say that, listen, your cost of fund has gone down because you have more liquidity or you have this or that, but it has to be looked at in the context of risk. A very interesting point, let me point out, single point answer, clearly the cost of funds is going down. I don't know about Rohit, but I can tell you that it has gone down for the top 5% developers in the market in the last 2 to 3 months because the risk for them has gone down because market will clearly consolidate. And you don't need to be sitting on a panel with all these things that market will consolidate and lesser number of developers will get the market share. And clearly, I can tell you that their cost of funds are going down, going by what has happened in the last 30 to 60 days. But very interestingly, and something which was very surprising for me personally, only we, and I'm sure we are a minority, we are in active discussion with at least 4 foreign institutional investors who want to invest in India in the real estate space residential. I frankly thought that with what is happening, this kind of stuff will just not happen. And each one of them, two of them have existing experience in India. Two of them are new to India. Kuldeep, you talked about capital. There is enough capital, because the best way of reducing cost of capital is availability of capital. If the supply of capital goes up, the cost of capital for the right players will automatically go down. And I see no reason that the supply of capital will not go up. There is enough capital out there, but just as it applies to anything, there has to be the right package that has to be offered. It's not the macro story that sells in real estate. It is the micro story. It is the projects that sell. Like, we have had a fabulous experience with one of the projects that we invested with Rohit, for example. We like, instead of selling in 30 months, we sold in 7 months. What was underwritten. And now that becomes a story and a product to sell. And I think given the kind of stuff that is happening, ultimately every opportunity is relative in nature. Relatively speaking, there are a lot of green shoots as far as the Indian market is concerned. Consolidation. I can give you another example. We have something like 18 live projects, residential projects. In the month of April, Maruti did not sell a single car as per them. We booked 580 apartments as against about 1,200 apartments that we booked in the month of January. That's almost 50%. Okay, it is booking, it is not registration because everything was closed, but we expect about 90% of them to get closed or will get closed.
Vipul, let me ask you a quick follow-on question from that data point. Are those 580 sales choices which customers have made in this market of choosing an apartment and paying in advance? If yes, then those are more likely to be real sales than not. Would that be a fair assumption?
No, Kuldeep, you're assuming that these are not real sales. That's precisely what I'm saying. I'm saying these are real sales. These are apartments, but two very interesting factors. All of them are below 50 lakh rupees unit price. Okay. They are in the city of Pune, outskirts of Bombay, Gurgaon, Noida, Bangalore, Chandigarh. Second, I think in the month of May, again, we sold something like 700 apartments. And, I was just chatting with, again, one of the top developers. He said in the month of May, he's reached 70% of his January sale numbers in terms of units sold. So clearly what is going to happen is that the market will change. I personally believe, given the kind of problems that tenants are having, it's a very interesting, I was talking to a sociologist and he was explaining that active tenants, especially in some of the northern cities, are being asked to vacate simply because they work in a sensitive sector, like say a hospital or is a doctor, even though he's a rent paying tenant. And there is a huge psychological aspect to owning your home. And that entire thing of not having, rental, 1% rental yield on a home and not buying it and so on and so forth. I think if, not to call it a trend, but if I can, a 45 to 50 lakh rupee home will become more essential than a 5 lakh rupee car or a 2 lakh rupee holiday. People are their homes. So what they will do is they will not buy, say, a 1 crore home. They're unsure of their jobs. So they'll not buy a 1 crore home. They'll not take a big mortgage, but they'll say, I need a home. And the onus is on the developer community to come up with the products, as Rohit said, along with their financing partners, to get the right high quality mid and low income homes. I'm sorry to kind of push our case, but the fact of the matter is that that is what the data is pointing to. So if, like somebody talked about the fact that you have to accept what is happening. I think Ramesh talked about it, and that acceptance is right there. It's the writing on the wall. As far as residential is concerned, that is the game to play.
So let me ask you this, Balaji. Vipul's saying inflation is down, interest rates are down, What he's not saying, but I'm saying is gold and oil, is going to give India a trade surplus. So he's seeming to suggest that a lot of international capital has started looking at India. And, both Rohit and I certainly hope, and Mike included, certainly hope that, that will flow sooner rather than later. Are domestic investors going to behave differently? Why aren't they pulling out their checkbooks? Or is their risk perception different?
See, a domestic investor is usually more short-term in nature. So they are usually far more nervous as to what they want to do and how they want to do it. But overall, I do think that the domestic investor would also be interested in real estate, given that the volatility the stock markets have shown over the last few months. There would be a sizable allocation which will be started to be made towards real assets, whether it is gold or commodities or real estate. And real estate has always taken the largest slice of that pie. So I'm quite certain that there will be a lot more interest even among domestic investors to come into real estate. But what, as I repeat and reiterate, is they want to see a new sort of a developer, a sort of a more enlightened developer who knows, as Rohit was saying, that you need to be a professional, you need to have systems, you need to have a structure, you need to embrace technology. You're there on the cutting edge, rather than the old way of doing business where everything was very traditional, orthodox, not transparent. So I think it has to go hand in hand with the product and the market. And when they see that, the confidence will come back. And I absolutely agree with Vipul that there has been sales even in these sort of markets in some of our projects. They might not have been the same sales as it was before, but we didn't expect it. But it does give us a lot of confidence that people will always look at their home as their castle. And that will always bring people back to buying homes. But if it can get more catalyzed and multiplied, that we can take full advantage of these flows of capital if we start organizing ourselves, consolidating ourselves, and professionalizing ourselves. That would really be a booster.
You made some interesting points. You're talking about professionalism, catalyzing ourselves, so on and so forth. But Ramesh, let me come to you. The tools of yesterday won't work today because the problem is different. We've not seen this before. What are you telling your stakeholders, your development partners? What are you advising them on? What are the skills they need? How are the skill sets that we need for tomorrow going to be very different? Are they different? Are they more of the same? I'm not talking about workers and construction technology. I think that is like Rohit said, we need a day for that.
Kuldeep, did you mean our clients or did you mean our people?
Yeah, your clients.
So I think the first and most important thing a developer needs to do is, I think, focus on the fastest turnaround time, whichever asset class you're in. And I think Mike articulated it very well, that factory-like, manufacturing-like focus on turnaround time, design, build, sell, design, build, sell, design, build, sell. I think design, build, lease for office. So I think that's what's most required, and how you can kind of, and Rohit also spoke about how you can use everything possible from a technology point of view. There's so much to learn. You don't need to do everything. There's so much technologies available. I think that's the first thing from a developer point of view. I think the second thing is understanding that consumer behavior is going to change, at least going to change for the next 1, 2, 3 years, maybe post that things will get back to the way it was done pre-COVID. I think that's very, very important. And residential things, like not just residential, but across asset class of residential, office, retail, the focus on hygiene and health and safety. These are all nice words before, but now I think that becomes the number one important thing. Like we have in the last 1 week prepared 20 things which we never would look at when a tenant would look at a building. This is a new checklist of 20 things. So which each landlord has to kind of fill up now. saying I'm giving these 20 things. So that becomes important. Second is, I think if you look at millennials, especially the aging millennials, this is going to be the second recession they're going to be facing in a span of 11, 12 years. How are they going to behave? Are they going to buy? Are they going to rent? Do they want bigger apartments, smaller apartments? I think that's very important because they had delayed their home buying decisions first time around. And anyone who's not yet bought now is again getting back into the next recession because not too many people bought apartments in the last 5 years. So that's something which needs to be studied very carefully. We believe the markets would shift to more suburban areas from crowded city-centric for obvious all the distancing issues and all which we have been talking about. I think, and I think Vipul spoke about it very well. He said housing becoming a necessity more than ever before. Housing that gaining prominence. That's something which is going to kind of come back. Design changes. Developers need to adopt. We are coming out with a research very soon in terms of what buyers want in terms of new home design. What are those things they're going to be looking at? How should the study rooms be? Open areas, telecom, Wi-Fi connectivity, all those important things which people are going to be focusing on. One good thing I think which has happened to the real estate sector in the last 2-3 months is the overall problems which have been seen in the mutual fund sector. A lot of Indians stopped investing in real estate post demonetization around that time, 2015-16, and we also stopped saving money. Our savings rate have come down, and we stopped investing in real estate. A lot of money went into mutual funds. I think that's going to slowly change back again, because Vipul spoke about how that psychological comfort which is there in owning real estate, that tangibility, that volatility. Now, why is everyone crowding to buy Mike's product, the REIT? Mainly because of that, because you look at the volatility in general equity market versus a REIT. There's a lot of difference, a lot more predictability in the way Mike's REIT is doing, or just buying a physical real estate. I think those things will come back. Home buyers will go, and Rohit spoke about this. Everybody will want to buy apartments which is nearing completion. That financial closure becomes very important. I think people will look at a slightly bigger apartment going forward, especially people living in joint families, people wanting to upgrade, aspiration, all that will happen. I think Vipul made a very good point, and we have also been asking a lot of developers this question: how has sales been? I think April obviously was a tough month. I would put the number at around 20% of sales pre-COVID. By May, that 20 had become 40. June numbers, we just started June. I think it will come to a 50% number. And this is exactly what's happening in China. And some of the learnings in China is that residential is back to a 50% number. Hotels, close to 80 to 85% of the hotels have opened back in China, with an occupancy of around only 30-35%, but things have opened up. Office activity, my colleagues tell me, is back to a 55-60% number. Office occupancy, which means people who are going to office, is up to a 90% number, 85 to 90% number in most cities. So I think the biggest lesson from China for developers is things will bounce back. I know we are not China. We'll be fooling ourselves by saying we're going to do things like China. Maybe we'll take a few months extra, but China has shown that things will kind of bounce back. So these are some of the things which we are trying to guide our clients. From office point of view, today people don't want to spend capex. Everyone wants to negotiate. People are confused in terms of, should I give more space for social distancing? Should I take less space to save costs? So all those discussions kind of continue, and we are kind of continuously telling our partners what's happening in the market.
What are you telling your clients on how to revive demand? Rohit said, we can't depend on the government. I agree. Let's think about what we as a sector should do. Ramesh, Vipul, Balaji, Rohit, how do we stimulate demand? Ramesh, first you.
I think in an office space, it's very simple. Active asset management. more than ever before, the focus on safety, what I spoke about, and Mike also touched upon that. How do we show the tenants and their employees that you're going to be in a very safe environment? You may need to put in more capex, which not everyone is going to put. What happens to a building which is 30 years old, which is strata sold? Who's going to put that capex in air circulation and air ventilation and air conditioning there? So I think that active asset management becomes more important. My guidance is to developers on the office side is please don't get into a negative absorption trend, which means if you're 90% absorbed now, you shouldn't get into, if 90% of your building is occupied, don't get into an 85% mode, even if you have to give a little bit discount, give a little bit of freebies, some rent waivers, some reduction, some financial structuring to be done. Do that, because I think retention of a tenant becomes all the more important with this. So these are the two things I would say, Kuldeep.
Vipul, demand stimulation, residential. Vipul, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Sorry. I think it's any developer who talks, I get muted. No, I think it should be simply like in residential, it is product differentiation. It is innovative stuff like plots. I think plotting will do beautifully. If anybody wants to come into real estate with lack of confidence, he will buy plots. I think stuff like industrial housing will come back, or rather will get done in a very big way. But clearly, it's not a demand stimulation issue like if you reduce stamp duty by 5%, I don't think it will make some real big difference. I think the big difference will come in supply side intervention. If you are able to make your product right, there is too much demand at the mid and low level. It is just a supply side issue. If you're able to make it right, make it high quality, make it at the decent areas, which is feasible, financially feasible, it will sell.
Rohit, do you think developers can get to a level where we're doing franchising processes? I mean, let me draw an analogy. We've got manufacturing in this country and all around the world. You've got tier 1, you've got tier 2, you've got component suppliers, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Can we standardize CRM? Can we standardize product design? Can we standardize execution? There are local issues. Real estate's a very local business. There's no doubt about that. I'm not talking about, and then we do partnerships. Is that something which is utopia? Is it possible in this country? Next 5 years, 10 years?
I think that has a lot of hoops to jump through. And if I was to think about what sort of challenges that might face, I think the single biggest one is the mismatch of DNA between the person who's the franchisee and the franchisor. A person can builds a brand which is able to be franchised because of their brand values and their overall value system. And unless and until you have complete and total control on the delivery of the product, keeping in mind that those values will be adhered to. Because the value, real estate is a highly emotional product. It's really easy for, if we choose to franchise our brand, okay, it's great for somebody down there to say, oh, you know what, it's a Gera brand and we'll promise you a whole bunch of things, and then you're not going to be able to deliver that. The customer will buy, the project will be a success. But the franchisor's brand gets decimated by the end of one or two projects. So I think there are a number of, principally, at a high level, is it possible? Is it impossible? It's not impossible. Is it something that we can actually make happen? Sure. But I think this is the single biggest hurdle, because the rest of it, right? A developer at a local level may manage the local processes. Okay. You can get contractors, you can build, but the customer expectation and delivery to the customer expectation, it's, really the residential product, we are now told to disclose so many things, but the number of things that we don't disclose in an agreement or in a document or in the brochure. The type of paving that you will use in the parking, for example, if you don't define it, okay, the guy can put any rubbish in there and say this was not defined. You'll get away with it. But you know, the DNA and the brand that the franchisor is thinking about, if you build and you're going to put something which is something at a standard that's going to be long lasting. Whereas the guy who's got a short-term objective using somebody else's name, his only objective is maximizing the money. So I think yes, but you know, lot of things, lot of hoops to jump through.
I hear you, but the question, and Balaji, this is for you. Would consolidation in the residential industry, just like you've seen 6-7 players today control more than 60% of the office market, and today nobody in India residential controls more than a percentage of that market. In 10 years' time with consolidation, you know, do you think we will have or can have or should have more standardization, more processes, more control over execution so that the brand and the governance become, you know, a 0-1? Because then equity capital is just, you know, one resource.
Yeah. See, definitely, because I would feel there will be consolidation, because I think it's quite a very, very fragmented market as we see today. But it'll never be as consolidated as the office market or residential market. Globally, also, it is never so consolidated. So, but there will be consolidation, and there will be big players who will bring in some sort of quality controls and processes, because basically what we find, in order to stimulate demand, to answer your previous question also, there is a trust deficit. You want actual users, you want investors, everyone to come into this segment. Let's face it, there is a trust deficit. Most people are wary of real estate because of whatever has been the past unscrupulous practices there. So naturally, when big players come in, then there will be the trust deficit slowly getting more and more bridged. And that bridging will start happening because, as you said, there will be maybe third-party audits, quality controls, financial closures, escrow account, the whole enchilada, as we say, A to Z, they will happen. And there will be a large part of it which will be with the larger players. There will be large regional players, I would tend to believe. And so all of us, when we are investing also, we all tend to support the top half of the industry rather than the bottom half, because we are all trying to bet who the next big player will be. And you want to be riding on him to see that he grows and we grow alongside. So that is bound to happen. And that's the only way the trust deficit this sector currently suffers from can be bridged, in my opinion.
Great. Closing comments, 2 points from each of the panelists on what we need to get back, you know, to where we were 5-10 years ago in each of their sectors. Mike, first you. 2 things that you think we need to do to get back to normalcy, for want of a better word. Mike, you need to unmute.
Yeah, so in the office sector, I'm not sure that we want to get back to where we were 5 years ago. I think we want to continue on the trajectory that the Indian office market has been for the best part of a decade, where demand every year has increased, where last year we had across the market a world-leading absorption in the office market. I think we want to continue improving the quality of the product that's out there. I think we're heading in the right direction in the relationship between landlord and tenant, higher quality in every regard. When I say quality product, I mean in every sphere. So I think we just need to navigate forward, not go back to, navigate forward with enhanced asset management, as Ramesh alluded to, and ideally, we'll also be experiencing the China bounce back. When I have conference calls with people in Hong Kong now, they're all in the office in a suit and tie, looking over Hong Kong Harbour, and it's a great place. So I think it's a road bump. It's a painful road bump, but we're on the right trajectory, and we're supported by our customer base, which is world leading in the technology space, and that's only going to keep improving. So I don't say get back to. I say look forward.
I stand corrected. That was more for Rohit and me. Rohit, so your take, 2 or 3 quick points, 30 seconds.
Okay, so I think looking forward, I think the sector, we need to do 2 things. To ask for two things in my view are, one is customer centricity, live up to the trust, deliver beyond what is promised, or at the very least what is 100% promised. So customer centricity is one, and I think fiscal discipline is the other. With that, you can't be cowboys. You have to financial closure. We talked a little bit about that. Control. I've been saying this a lot, certainly over the last few years, that there's a fine line between ambition and greed. Be all the way to the extreme end of ambition, cross it over and get on the greed side of that line. So I think fiscal discipline and customer centricity are the 2 mantras that I would say the sector should focus on for us to kind of revive and resurrect ourselves.
Great. Ramesh.
I think India has made its name, like Mike said, as the back office of the world. I think this is an opportunity for us if we need to create employment. We're a large country to try. Not possible to compete with China head on. They do 70% of the mobile manufacturing, 40% of the computers. I think this is that opportunity for the government. For the state government, central government, to try and see if India can become a mini factory. I'm not saying like China, a mini factory of the world. I think that should be the full focus of the government, of driving that sector, the industrial sector. The office will be on auto mode. Things will come back in the next few months. But on the industrial manufacturing space, there are those big opportunities. Today, you look at the electronics and high-tech sector, definite opportunity in places like Bangalore, NCR, Hyderabad, Chennai, to create hubs around that. Pharma sector, again, Hyderabad, Pune, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, these cities could evolve. Chemical, whether it's Dahej, Mumbai, Baroda, auto and auto ancillary, Chennai, NCR, Ahmedabad. I think that's what the government should focus on. Look at 4-5 big sectors. Look at 4-5 cities in the country which can evolve. And if that happens automatically, like Vipul said, industrial, residential, industrial townships, all that will happen. If corporates come in, office space demand will automatically go up. A lot of things can come into place. I think the government needs to focus on that. But the good news is, I've been on calls with at least 4 state governments. This is not me asking for calls. It's state governments asking us for feedback in terms of what they need to do. At least that's a positive sign. We need to wait and watch how much of it will get executed. But that's something which I think we need to kind of kickstart with all this migrant labor, unemployment, all that mess. I think the focus on manufacturing, it won't happen overnight. It may take 1, 2, 3 years, but better late than never, but start today.
Diversified, distributed growth, less congested cities. Vipul and Balaji in that order, quickly.
I think really one. I don't think you didn't need to do too much different. As a residential developer, I think you should just go and buy land cheap, whether you buy it directly or you buy it as distressed, which will be pretty much there. You need to have construction efficiency, whether it's by technology or whether it's just the fact, and you need to aggressively sell. I think that is all you need to do with a little bit focus on your product. Second, one very interesting data point which one of our trainees had brought in, and I keep emphasizing, please remember, we will never go back to even the top 10 players. The top 10 players in terms of sales in Indian real estate residential have changed every decade ever since I've been here. In the 90s, the top 10 players were different. In the 2000s, the top 10 players were different. 2010 to 20, they were different. And I have no reason to believe they won't be different in 2020 plus. It is just about them doing what I said, the three things simpler, new things will come. But in the short term, I think, one mistake or one stuff which is generally being done is there's too much of future forwarding on thought process. I seriously feel that there should be slightly greater empathy and sensitivity to what is happening around us right now in terms of our employees and organizations and all the co-contributors within the organization and stakeholders. So I think we have a pretty tough challenge going forward, at least for the next 3 to 6 months and 12 months. So anybody who survives this play will automatically in the top pile. So that
Excellent.
will be fine.
Keep it simple, change is constant. Balaji.
I would tend to agree with most of them, but I would just tend to add that we should not abandon projects. All the abandoned projects or all the festering sort of work in progress, all the unsold inventory, we need to take it on a serious, aggressive note to try and liquidate it, try and resolve disputes, whatever they are, because these are the ones which create a bad image for the industry. Everybody whom you meet usually will have one sad tale to tell you as to where he's got stuck with. So somewhere our industry bodies, associations, we need to have a self-regulation to resolve these disputes and bring down these sort of bottlenecks which we have created for ourselves. And that is important because, as I said, we need to bring back trust. We need to bring a positive image to this industry. And that's how I think we will grow, simply put.
Interesting thoughts. With that, we're completely out of time. I'm going to have to hand us back to Archana and Ajit. Thank you, co-panelists. Great session.
Thanks, Kuldeep. It was lovely.
Thank you so much, Kuldeep, and thank you everyone for a very, very insightful discussion. We have extremely limited time for our Q&A session. We'll have maybe 1 or 2 questions that panelists can address. Ajit, over to you for that, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kuldeep, for navigating this, and thanks all the panelists. Kuldeep, you've been asking questions now. I think it's time for you to answer, right?
Sure.
A quick thing. Do you think lack of transparency in the sector has, in the financial reporting and in the financial side of it, has led to the lack of trust, due to which it does not attract required capital?
Sorry, say that last bit again, I lost you.
All right. So the lack of transparency in the sector, has that led to not attracting required capital by the companies?
I think you can't paint everything with one brush. So yes, the lack of trust has meant that, capital, as one of our co-panelists said, has gone to a select set of people. But that also tells you that there is capital which is available and can go to a wider set of audiences, and I think it was Whipple who said that, the number of top 10 developers are pretty much in each city, barring perhaps a Bangalore and maybe 1 or 2 other cities, has changed every 10 years. And it will continue to change because capital will go first where there's governance and safety, and second where there's trust.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rohit, this is to you. Today, the use of technology is very poor by real estate companies, right? What do you think is the future of construction with tech like precast and manufacturing areas and drone, all those things?
So I think if you look at construction technology, certainly with the new, the moment there's a labor crisis, take oil for example. Oil crosses $100. You start looking at alternatives. Oil comes to $30, nobody's looking at anything different. So it's the same thing with so labor not available. I think developers, constructors, builders, contractors are going to start looking at the use of technology to mitigate against that risk of losing of their construction workers. So you bring machines in, you bring mechanization in. That's one part. In terms of the information technology.
Yes, absolutely. I think we lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think very quickly, Balaji, for you. In absence of IBC, what is and we just talked about half-baked projects and all that. What are the resolution for that? And where is an exit for those half-done and distressed assets? How they will exit out?
I have a feeling it can be resolved maybe bilaterally or multilaterally with the help of industry bodies. The other way of resolution is through arbitration one can look at. And IBC is only the last resort, and people should not really rush to IBC just to have a strong arm tactic. So there are other dispute resolution mechanisms which can be resorted to. The thing is, we should all have the attitude and the inclination towards trying to resolve it rather than pushing it under the carpet or burying our head in the sand. That attitude, if there is a change, then I'm sure we will be able to resolve quite a few of these long pending issues.
Thank you very much. Mike, this goes to you. How does this whole thing impact REITs in India? There were a bunch of REITs that were planned to be listing this year. What happens there?
I mean, I think that there may be or may have been a delay because of the market application, but we think there will be some more high quality REITs in due course, and that's a good thing as you get a broader market and you're able to benchmark. So in fact, the main cause of delay was the change that was there around dividend distribution tax that was announced in the budget, and then thankfully it was rolled back a couple of months later. You know, that frankly caused more delay in the next stage of REITs than now COVID, yes, provides some uncertainty, but I believe that it's likely that there will be some more high quality REITs in time to come, and that will just take a bit longer.
Thank you. Vipul, this is very specific to you. Somebody asked to ask Vipul, given your interest in medical, how do you rate opportunities and look into the healthcare real estate?
If you're saying healthcare real estate, if it means owning hospitals and REITing them out, definitely.
And then there are very, kind of research centers and all that, right? So some of the healthcare REs are onto that side as well.
Yeah, so that will largely come under the commercial part of it, because when you're talking about that segment, because specialty hospital related sale and lease models will come up, but like it happens, there is a public aspect to it. My personal thing in India is that while it may be a good thing on paper, because there is a social aspect to it, it may not always be commercial in nature. And like we're seeing right now, a lot of private hospitals are being taken over by government because it's a social necessity and it's an essential commodity to that extent. So that is, strictly speaking, against the thing of making returns. But yes, it will be a factor. It will be interesting to see how that can be played.
Thank you. Ramesh, two questions for you. One is, what do you think about this whole job security, employability, and the stability factor, which is being kind of with ambiguous in people's mind? And the second one, which is on the business side, is that would it mean the demand shifting from CBD areas and more increasing towards SBD office assets?
I think there is that uncertainty in terms of job loss, salary cuts, that's going to be there for some time. What we are trying to, as an organization, tell people that we care for people. We have a large workforce in India. 12,000 people work for us in India, and tell our people that they're not in this alone, and try and keep communicating more with them. Tell them nobody has a clear path. So as things emerge, we'll figure out a way to take it forward. But more than anything else, I think staying connected with people helps. I think suburbanization would happen mainly because of all the worries of staying in congested locations in small homes. People would want, at least for their parents, bigger home, have a separate room. Instead of staying in a better area in a 1-bedroom, they may want to go to a suburb and stay in a 2-bedroom, or maybe a 2.5-bedroom, move a little further down because you need a study room because work from home is going to happen. That's the reason I said there would be a move to the suburban locations.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Over to Archana to wrap up today's session.
Thank you, Ajit. Thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderful discussion and for your patience in addressing all questions. I'm sure our viewers have a lot more to ask, and we will try and get back to them as soon as we can on those. It has been our absolute pleasure to host this event and get your perspectives to people who have tuned in. We look forward to engaging further with each one of you and the audience at large. As an executive search firm, our deep focus is across the real estate segment, and we look forward to the industry bouncing back with heightened activity soon. With this, we will wrap up the session and wish everybody a great evening ahead, a great year ahead with the economy opening up. Please stay please stay safe, everyone, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your time, and thanks very much again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
wonderful weekend, everybody.
Kuldeep, well done. Thank you.
Great weekend.
Thanks very much, Kuldeep.
Thank you, everybody.
You.
Yeah.